Welcome back to the pole position. The last few weeks have seen a number of interesting election results across the world that have painted an interesting picture for the future. I'd like to preface this video by saying sorry for the lack of uploads over the last few weeks. Hopefully now I'll be able to make more videos at a more frequent rate going forward. First, we saw the Portuguese parliamentary election, which saw the centre-right Social Democrats and the hard-right Chega party gain seats at the expense of the centre-left Socialist Party. This was after the incumbent Prime Minister Luís Montenegro called for a no-confidence vote in his own administration as a way to force the opposition into calling an election, which led to the snap vote that was won by Montenegro's party. Portuguese politics has been in a state of flux as the traditional centre-left and centre-right have struggled to form a coherent government due to the rise of the hard-right Chega party, in addition to a series of scandals that have affected both parties. The gamble of forcing a snap election has indeed paid off, at least somewhat, for the Social Democrats, as they managed to gain 11 seats, although they did fall short of a majority, meaning they will need to work with other parties, most likely Chega, if they wish to avoid further elections. Chega have been growing in Portugal for a while now, and are now the second largest party, performing better than any other third party in decades, whilst the Socialists came third in seats despite winning 4,000 more votes than Chega, although there is only a 2-seat difference between the two. The Socialists have a long road ahead to recover after this loss. It is an especially large fall for them as just 3 years ago they were able to win an overall majority in the parliament, only to have their government topple over infighting and various scandals. Whether or not the Social Democrats can maintain their minority government, it is certainly an interesting time in Portuguese politics with a lot of factors in play. Over in Poland, the country's electorate recently voted in their new president, Karol Nawrocki, and what a result it was. Nawrocki won by less than a percentage point, with a majority of less than 400,000 votes over his opponent, Rafał Trzaskowski. Karol Nawrocki is a historian and a firm conservative, backed by the main opposition Law and Justice Party, although he himself is an independent. He is a firm supporter of Donald Trump and a rather divisive figure in Poland who is no stranger to controversy. His victory is a serious blow to the Prime Minister Donald Tusk, who is hoping to get Civic Platform candidate Rafał Trzaskowski into office. This defeat will make passing new legislation difficult, as the President has significant power, including a veto, which requires a 3/5 majority, which the ruling coalition does not have. This will make many of Tusk's more liberal reforms near impossible, as Nawrocki has been vocal about his opposition to many of the government's proposals. This tension is sure to cause conflict between the President and Prime Minister, meaning Poland may have some turbulent times ahead. Over in Romania, the presidential runoff resulted in pro-European candidate Nicu Jordan winning against hard-right Eurosceptic George Simion. This was in the aftermath of the previous election's cancellation, as a Romanian constitutional court had annulled the first-round results citing Russian interference, in support of Eurosceptic Călin Georgescu. Dan ran as an independent but was backed by numerous centre-right and centre-left parties, all united against Simion. This result is seen as a huge defeat for the hard right in Europe, which has seen success in other elections, including, of course, Poland, although it should be said that Simion still won a firm share of the vote in both the first and second rounds, never going below 40%. Romania has been in a state of political turmoil, and the question of how well Dan will be able to navigate this turmoil going forward remains to be seen. South Korea has just elected Liberal politician Lee Jae-myung as its new president, marking a new chapter in South Korean politics after the turbulent presidency of Yoon Suk-yeol. Back in 2024, amid cratering approval ratings, then South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol attempted to declare martial law and strip power from the opposition-controlled National Assembly, accusing the opposition of conspiring with North Korean communists. A famous moment during these events was when now President Lee Jae-myung live-streamed himself climbing over a fence to reach the assembly, or the multitude of videos showing protesters clashing with the military outside the assembly building. Suffice it to say, this backfired spectacularly for Yeol, as the parliament was able to overturn the declaration and impeach him. Months of political turmoil ensued, with an early election held on the 3rd of June. The vote saw a nearly 80% turnout, with Jae-myung winning 49.4% of the vote, ahead of his conservative challenger, Kim Moon-soo, who struggled partly due to his opposition towards removing Suk-yeol from office. Jae-myung has tried to pitch himself as both a pragmatist and a populist, offering significant proposals to reform South Korea's electoral system and governmental structure, whilst also pursuing improvements to defence, as well as a more friendly approach towards the Trump administration. Jae-myung has been a somewhat unlikely ally of Trump given his liberal credentials, but he has been keen to pursue friendlier ties with the administration in DC. Part of this is seen as personal, as he, like Trump, was also the victim of an assassination attempt last year, but a large part is also around defence and economic cooperation. Now that the Democratic Party of Korea controls both the Assembly and the presidency, South Korea now seems to be in a period of greater political stability. However, it remains to be seen if the Democrats can hold on to power come the next legislative election. Over here in Scotland, on Thursday, voters in the Scottish Parliament constituency of Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse went to the polls to elect a new member of the Scottish Parliament after passing of the incumbent MSP and Government Minister Christina McKelvey. The seat was previously seen as a shoo-in for the Scottish Labour Party, after their decisive victory over the SNP last July. However, since the Labour government came into power, they have been seeing cratering polling, both north and south of the border, largely due to the surge of Reform UK. Many were saying this seat was a three-horse race between Labour, the SNP and Reform, with some suggesting Labour would be as low as 3rd place, but this is not what happened. Despite the odds favouring the SNP, Labour won the seat with a majority of 602 votes over the SNP in a huge upset. Their vote actually decreased by 2 percentage points against the last Scottish Parliament vote, but the SNP vote all but cratered, whilst Reform shot up to a close 3rd, only 900 votes away from 2nd, and 1,500 away from victory. This result tells us a few things. Firstly, the SNP are doing worse than expected. We can see this because almost every estimate was favouring them to win by a small margin. The SNP were also overestimated by most models prior to the 2024 election, with no major pollster predicting them to win less than 10 seats, with the number usually being much higher. Second, Labour's vote in Scotland is holding better than people expected, or at least enough to do better than the SNP. This can also be seen in various council by-elections, where Labour is largely maintaining the votes from the previous Scottish Parliament election, although they are still doing nowhere near as well as they did in July. Thirdly, Reform, despite not having the same established grassroots, have proven themselves a credible threat to the other parties, even in areas not traditionally leaning their way. What this means for the Scottish Parliament is that Reform have a very good chance of winning seats on the regional list, which will be particularly damaging to both Labour and the Conservatives. They also have the chance to win constituency seats, which would be devastating for all parties, and would be a massive victory from a party that got less than 10% of the vote in Scotland less than a year ago. It also means that the anti-SNP vote will be more split, but the SNP have also seen their vote plummet, meaning the results may be very hard to predict come next May. A lot of elections have happened over the last few weeks, with many more to come, so be sure to subscribe, like and leave a comment below. As always, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.